Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show to talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about The Power, Season 1, Episode 6. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, let's start off with Joss's side of things. Obviously, her and Ryan are doing their thing, they're making out, and then, Joss gets a little, as they call it, sparkly fingers, which I thought was kind of interesting, and it ended up being kind of that awkward thing where, Ryan was like, yo, stop, and she wouldn't stop. I was like, yo, that's a little, ugh. And it's like, well, it probably doesn't statistically happen that often, but the shoe can be on the other foot with the person you typically wouldn't think can be the more, sexually aggressive person can be, I'm not saying it's not like it's out of the realm of possibility. So I just thought that was interesting to kind of flip the script in that regard. But, Joss explains, right, because, out of anyone else, it is such an interesting thing where we have characters like Allie has such expansive control of her powers. Her power might be the most powerful of them, at least that we're aware of. But it's so interesting that Joss is the only one that's hers is still so erratic. Even people who have regular level abilities, everyone else has complete controls over theirs, but Joss doesn't. And I wonder that feels like that might be pretty significant going forward in some regards. So, but yeah, she's basically my powers kind of I lose control of them and then kind of take control of me. So her and Ryan are kind of making up, and and we find out something about Ryan. It turns out he's intersex. So I looked into it because I wasn't fully sure if the intersex was what I thought it was. So it turns out it's someone who it doesn't even just apply to a genitalia thing. It's also chromosomes and stuff like that. So for him, it's I was kind of born with both, and I am a boy. I mean, he's I identify as a boy. I was like, okay. But the moment that conversation came up, I was like, wait a minute. Especially because knowing hey, it's not just genitalia. It can even be a chromosome thing. That I was like, could it be that could he get a skein? Turns out because he says because his body produces a large amount of estrogen. So I was like, I guess he ended up developing a skein in his own right. So I was like, interesting. So it puts him in a very unique position. It's at first I was wondering, is that why he was so antsy about her using her powers on him? But now I'm thinking the reason why he was kind of scared was because he was afraid that her using her powers on him. Because we have no idea what it's like when, we've seen someone use their powers in a sexual sense, and what was that, an episode or two ago? But we don't know what it's like when two people with powers are doing their thing. Because I can't remember if it was True Blood or something else, but I remember there was a vampire thing where it's the vampires were biting each other and feeding off their blood while they were having sex. So I was wondering if it'd be something like that. Maybe that's what he was because he was kind of getting charged up from it, and he was scared that if Joss kept going, he would have let go of his powers, his powers would have kind of ended up flooding out, because that actually plays into Margot's side of things. But really quickly, I'll talk about the test, how it basically overflows your skein, and your skein has no choice but to kind of accidentally discharge. And so I was wondering, it might be a similar regard, especially if she's using her power enough and is charging up in his skein, and he would just have no choice but to accidentally release. So that's probably what he was kind of scared of. Or maybe maybe doesn't even have to go that far. Maybe it could just be hey, her powers are flowing through my body. It just accidentally makes mine kind of fickle out. It makes me lose control, and I have to actively force myself not to use my powers, and her using hers on me might make mine slip out. I mean, it's still the same end result, but maybe the explanation for his reservations about it might be a little different. But it turns, I thought maybe that was what he was scared of, that she might even give him the power. But it turns out, no, he already had the power. The moment she accidentally shocked him at the locker, that's when he got it. It was interesting. So it's so interesting. You gave your mom the power intentionally. That was the first time it had ever happened. You'd actually accidentally given someone the powers before without even intending to. And for him, he kept it quiet this entire time, which Joss had a big issue with. It's with my mom putting herself out there, getting death threats, you're hiding your powers. You get to kind of have these powers, but get to hide away. It's this ain't a time for hiding. It's about you coming out, which is there's two sides to that argument. I get it. It's like, yo, we're all in this fight together and you're hiding, but not everyone's ready to put their business out there, to put themselves out there. That applies to any situation of being different in the past. That's asking anyone that is gay in the past, like, oh, you need to be out there in the front. It's like, especially in a situation where, you know, in the past you would be killed, or, you know, threatened and or killed just for being, like, you know, it's not the easiest thing to ask someone to put their life on the line. That's not, you know, it comes down to every person whether or not they're comfortable at that point in time. And it is, so it's that side of things where I understand what Joss is saying, like, hey, we got to unite together, and you're kind of hiding. But I also get from Ryan where it's like, it's my body. Like, the fact is, I am telling you now, Joss, because if we exclude the EOD thing, Ryan probably isn't that comfortable. Like, we don't know how many people he's ever opened up about his intersex situation. It could be a thing of Joss could be like, because she's like, oh, like, you don't want to have sex with me in the car, but you like had sex with so and so in the bathroom. Who knows if so and so actually knows about Ryan's circumstances? This might be Ryan, who knows when he would have felt fully comfortable explaining it to you. He had to explain it to you now because there are extenuating circumstances because of the EOD, you know, Skane situation. But any other non-science fictional angle to it, you know, it probably would have been a while, you know, until he felt comfortable announcing that, like, hey, I'm intersecting, you know, and it's got this added level to it now because of the ability. So it is a thing of, it's my body. Like, I should be able to one who decides when I kind of reveal that. That ends, and I'm sure, like, people who are transgender have that same complications. Like, when do you tell your significant other, like, or the people that you're potentially, you know, in a suitor situation with, like, when you're in that dating field, like, when do you tell someone and how long do you wait? You know, the longer you wait, the more of an issue it can potentially arise and turn out to be. So it's a complicated thing. Like, I see both sides. I see Joss's side of things, but I also see Ryan's circumstances too. And even Joss realizes, like, it is kind of like, even like, yes, the fight is what it is, but it is also messed up for me to kind of drag someone. Because once again, this situation isn't always been a blessing. That's a point they've tried to get across too. This isn't just a blessing. It's also a curse for some people. So it puts Ryan in a very specific situation because he's like, yo, they were basically killing people, ripping out their EOD, like their skeins. I'm a dude with an EOD, like with EOD with a skein, like, what are they gonna do to? I'll be the first on the chopping block to be like, oh, you're kind of in this complicated spot right now. So it's a really interesting development, and so it's gonna be interesting to see where Joss and Ryan, where they end up kind of past this. Can they find their way past this? It's a very, very complicated and delicate situation. So there's that. We have Tundi back home. You know, he's there showing up at a wedding. His buddy Wale is getting married, but it turns out his buddy has reservation because it turns out, hey, my wife has lied to me, and now she's revealing my fiance is revealed to me that she has the powers. He's like, 10 years she's lied to me. It's like, bro, calm down with the exaggerations in 10 years. The power thing has only come up in the past 3 months. So, but for him, it feels like it's changing the entire dynamic of their relationship. It's like, right, like, she's powerful, like, what if she zaps me? And Tundi, you know, he's coming at it from a perspective of, obviously, with his more recent experiments about his experiences, and he's talking about this could lead to equality. He's like, how is it equality? He's like, dude, look at your biologically speaking, like, look at your forearms. You could easily hurt a woman, like, you know, just because of that. This evens the playing field. And even he was saying, like, I would never hurt her. And it's like, good. But do you think has she ever used her powers on you? Because he's like making a point, like, you never hit her. What makes you jump to the conclusion that, oh, just because she has this power, she would jump to doing it? Like, you haven't gone out of your way to hurt her, even though you've always had this biological, like, advantage just from, like, the fact is that, you know, from a biological standpoint, you develop, like, you're bigger and you can develop more muscles. I don't even know about that scientifically, but definitely, like, you're on a biological level, on average, I'm sure, like, just because of where she is, it's like, yeah, you're bigger than her regardless. So it's like, so I thought that was such an interesting thing. But also, Tundi's also dealing with his own PTSD, because of the whole Riyadh situation. Every time like he hears like a car like backfire, or even the bottle of the champagne like popping, or wine or whatever popping, it makes him duck. Like it's there, you know. And so obviously he was looking at Deacon's article about the government, obviously, like about them murdering women, taking their skeins in Carpathia. I think he was even going to go there next. I mean, he might even go to the U.S. again just to meet up with Deacon, maybe. To kind of probably talk about that, which we'll talk about more on Deacon's side of things, especially when it comes to him and Rob. But at the wedding, Nadudi ends up showing up, and she actually looks at Tundi and realizes how much he's changed. And obviously for him, it's like, because of what you said that night, like I was just kind of doing my thing, but now I'm actually doing something that matters. And he's like, I actually wish you were there with me, you know, because it's like, oh, how was the Riyadh situation? It was just kind of like, it was hard, you know. And he's like, I wish you were there with me. But for her, it's like, there's so much she has to do. For her, it's like, you've got to go work out there. This is the journey you on, but my journey is still here at home. She's like, I need to change things. We can change how things are kind of run in Nigeria. Like, get rid of all of the corruption that men have kind of like let breed here, and like a new matriarchy could like rise in its place. Like, I want to change my country for the best. And it's kind of like and I'm sure for Tundi, that's why he didn't, I mean, he kind of pushes for it later on, but he also understands because of his circumstances of like, God, I'm blanking on her name, the woman he met in Riyadh, like how her perspective of, I love my country, and that whole experience changed Tundi for the best. And I think when he looks at and understands what Nadudi wants to do, he understands that, like, hey, you want to save this country, you want to change it for the better. I get it, because the world is changing. This is an opportunity for change in a good way. So the two of them end up doing their thing, but at the end of the day, she still has to stay here because that's what work is, and he has to go everywhere, because she's even telling him to like write a journal everywhere that he's going. And he's like, oh, where am I going? She's like, everywhere, because this is such a worldwide thing. You need to go out there. And I'm assuming his story, especially if he ends up going to Carpathia, I'm sure he's going to end up running into Tatiana. So I'm sure he's going to ultimately end up interacting with a lot of the main characters. So maybe some leads to him talking to Roxy, or at least being connected to Roxy stories, maybe even Allie. Like, he might end up being kind of like, not necessarily the centerfold piece, but he might end up being like kind of connective tissue amongst the characters, since he's already interacted with Margot. Like I said, it's a multitude of places he could go. He could either go talk to Deacon, but it could most likely be he could go to Carpathia to kind of like learn really like what went down with all those women. That could lead to him interacting, like I said, with Tatiana. So, speaking of Roxy, obviously we're dealing in the aftermath of Terry's death. It seems like, based on what an interaction Roxy's dad had with a guy who owed him like protection money, I guess. They are telling a story like Terry died in a car accident. So I guess, I don't know whether, I guess just because the truth is so bloody and disturbing, or maybe it's just a situation of it's not. I was wondering, like, could it be a thing of, oh, it makes you look weak knowing how Terry died, like the public know, or like maybe people try to use that as an opportunity. I don't know. Maybe it's just, and maybe it makes it a little easier on Terry's mom, or Daryl and Ricky's mom, if you just don't tell the truth in that regard. Maybe not having the truth kind of out there, no, because it is a thing of like, let us grieve in our own way, so it's pretty painful, so we don't like, we'll tell people a lie just so we keep how he actually died to ourselves. Obviously Roxy feels bad about it all, and she ends up talking to Daryl, and Daryl wants nothing to do with this. He wants to kind of walk away, and so it's just after everything that kind of went down, like, he's not blaming her about Terry's death, because once again, and she even says it later on, they kind of all knew what time it was. He's the first one to pull out the gun, is kind of what she was saying, and we all kind of knew the risk. We all made that choice. They all made that choice to ride with me, knowing what this was about, but doesn't take away I mean, it's also the thing is, like, it doesn't no matter what, their her dad's her stepmom, even though she would never even acknowledge herself as like Roxy's stepmom, because it's like, no, I have my children, I have my three. You're not one of my children. I'm not even your stepmom. I'm the woman married to your dad. There's a big distinction, right? So for her, they all probably feel like Roxy doesn't feel bad about it. She does. She does have guilt over it. Like, regardless of what she says, there's still the personal aspect of, yes, I did still convince my brother to go with me. So later on, when her stepmom ended up like yelling at her because Roxy was like, I can give it to you so you can feel safe. She's like, I don't want it. It's like, that was my brother. It's like, no, he was mine. I was going to keep him safe. So when it's all said and done, her dad, was his name Bernie? Yeah, yes, and her name's Barbara. The wife. I thought it was Barbara, but I wasn't sure. But Bernie ended up taking Roxy to the guy that owed him money and was like, oh, okay, shock the dude. But she's like, no, I don't want to. Because she was all about it. And she even told Daryl, like, yeah, it felt good to kill the guy that killed her mom. But I think it's still that thing of, yeah, it feels nice to get revenge, but it feels that void is still, it doesn't fill that void completely. And so it's just kind of like, no, I'm not going to go out of my way to hurt some guy that I don't really know. I hurt and killed that guy because he wronged me. This guy, I don't know him. You're just telling me to shock him for no reason. And so for him, it's like, oh, now my daughter wants to shit her pants. It's like, no. She's like, I get it, Dad. You, and she went on about like how they knew what was going on. Terry pulled the gun first. They knew what I was going to go do. And she's like, stop it. And he's like, or else. She's like, he's basically yelling at her to stop it. And she's like, or what? It's like, with my situation, like, you can't really do too much because I will zap the shit out of you, homie. So that's where things kind of stand. Power dynamic isn't what it was before. Like, yeah, she kind of had to fall in line because your dad, but it's like, nah, motherfucker, I'm the one with the power now, so what are you going to do? That's why she was like, or what? Or what? I was like, hey, yo. And even he has to kind of, I mean, for one, it's his daughter, he doesn't want to lay a hand on her, but it's also a thing of, you lay your hands on her, it's going to be a big problem for you. So that's the complicated rub of it all. So, Margot and Rob, circling to their side of things, things are still pretty bad between them. They tried to mend fences with everything that went on, but Margot was still like, I'm kind of entitled to an apology. Like, it's that thing of, there is some truth in what Rob brought up last episode. Still doesn't take away from the fact is you were kind of an asshole about how you approached it. I mean, to be fair, you were drunk out your mind. So it's, and I guess he apologized before, but he's like, no, I'm not going to go through this again. That's why I almost feel like, was it a thing of, did you like, is it you, or was it a thing of you actually apologize and she wants you to keep apologizing? Or was it a thing of you explained yourself but never actually apologized? That's one I wondered. There's a bit of distinction, So things are kind of still bad between them because Margot's got her career and everything to think about. But also for Rob, it's like, we used to be about doing the right thing. And now it feels like you've lost that. And for her, it's like, I am doing the right thing. I'm a part of a system. I have to go about things a certain way. It is also the thing is Rob is in the wrong because he made that decision unilaterally. Yes, he should have talked to Margot about it because his decision doesn't just affect him because he ended up talking to a lawyer. It's like, as long as his name doesn't come up, it's fine. But if it does, there's a good chance he could end up going to jail. Like, it's a federal crime, the documents and stuff that he leaked. So he could be facing some jail time. And it's like, but he's like, oh, Deacon won't give me up. It's like, you say that now. You even talk to Deacon later. He's like, oh, bro, I'd never give you up. It's like, no, I get it. But it's like, I think Margot, didn't she say like last episode he'd sell his own mother out for a story? It's like he's kind of a scumbag. So it's a thing of like, it feels heavily foreshadowing that he will. I mean, if you get enough pressure, enough people, I mean, as a journalist, you like, right, you don't give up your source, but if you get enough pressure breathing down your neck, you got the guillotine above you, you're going to start squealing like a pig, being like, hey, yo, this is it, this and that. Especially when you have someone like Daniel. Oh, if he can find any leverage against Margot and Rob will be just that. He'll be like the nail in her coffin when it comes to her career. The moment it turns out like, hey, your husband is the one who revealed all that. That, once again, I had brought that up previously, that the opening where we saw some of that flash forward stuff, like out of context stuff, we saw Margot and there was some like police or whatever. I'm sure they're there to arrest Rob because they found out, or not unless this is something that hasn't happened yet, that either Margot did or maybe it has something to do with Joss. But at the very least for now, it seems like it leans towards maybe it's like Rob. At the very least, that's at the top of my list of most likely what that was about. Them after Rob, because it's like Daniel probably like really pushed for it. Ended up finding out that he was behind it, some shape or form. It might even be a thing of he probably gave Margot an option. It's like, cool, you bail out of this Senate race, or I'm gonna let the government know who leaked those documents, and your husband can serve some severe jail time. And maybe Margot decided not to back down. We'll have to wait and see where things kind of go on that front to see the full context of that, and if it plays out the way I think it will. But either way, even Rob is finding his complicated. Like, he was talking to Deacon, and it's like, right, he doesn't know if him and like Margot going to be able to work past this, because it's like, yeah, they've had their disagreements before, but like for him it feels like this is different. He's like, yeah, I've always been fine with a powerful woman, but for him it's like, it's just a thing of this is too much. It isn't what he signed up for. I mean, no one signed up for. In like 3 months, the world has changed so drastically, and it's just kind of you adapt or you get left behind. Which as a scientist, he understands that, but it's a little bit different when it's in your personal life. He also doesn't know Margot has her powers, which that's going to be a whole conversation of like. But it's also like, right, if I decide to get the power, why do I have to talk to you about it? I shouldn't have to discuss what I'm going to do with my body, but it's still a thing of, it is a marriage. It's, it's not like me telling you what to do with your body, but it is a thing of like, at least letting me know that this is what you're feeling, this is what you're thinking. It's just like, it depends on the circumstances, but, typically in a situation where like, hey, you were deciding to have like an abortion, you wanted to, you typically would have like both parents involved. And I say that's not always the case, because there are extenuating circumstances where the father isn't involved and shouldn't be involved, or just chooses not to be involved in those decisions, and it's up to the woman alone. So it ends up being that element to it as well. That's why I'm like, it doesn't always, and I can't even say typically, because it varies from circumstance to circumstance with the whole abortion conversation. So, but speaking of Daniel, since I brought him up earlier, he's instituting a thing where it's like, hey, everyone has to get tested, specifically those in government jobs, to determine whether or not they have the power. It's almost like why is that necessary? I mean, it's not equatable, but it's still like, to me, it's almost the same thing as like, well, would you have to run, I mean, I get you have to run background checks and stuff on people like that, but I mean, would you have to really like be tested if you carried around a weapon? If you were like, oh, I have a license to own a firearm, like to me, it's the same equivalency. I mean, it's, once again, we're living in a different world. We're talking about a gun versus actual superpowers, which that's a whole conversation with. I keep forgetting the dude's name, the like Ubernox guy or whatever. That whole circumstance about like, oh, like they might have this power, but it's ours to take back. We got weak. We let things kind of play out, and we lost this war, but it's our time. Like, yeah, these women might have the power, but we have guns. They're not bulletproof. It's like, hey, I mean, once again, we've seen firsthand people rallying someone. Once again, you got that cult-like mentality. You talk to a group that feels disenfranchised. That, they get swept up with your thoughts, your rhetoric, because they feel beaten down, like, oh, the way life is currently is not suitable for me. It makes me feel smaller, and you feel like there's someone who's finally listening to you, finally speaking the things that you like think and believe. So it really you get swept up in that irrational hysteria. So because you feel like, oh, as a man, I'm being emasculated and everything, so I'm losing my place in what is supposed to be the food chain that is like humanity and stuff. But either way, because the only person who knows at work is Helen about Margot's circumstances, so we're circling back to that. And Daniel was like, yeah, we're getting those tests, which Helen is helping Margot kind of move past that. It's like, right, you kind of use like your pain or whatever and your breathing to kind of stop it. So the test ultimately goes down. The person administering the test actually had to have the test done herself, which even Margot was like, how can you live with yourself having to do this? Because it is that thing. It's like a registry of like, yes, you put people on the list and that can be used to like be discriminated against them. Like, oh, you can't get this job because you had this power. But it's also because it makes it easier for people to be tracked down and hated, because it's like, oh, you literally have a roster of, oh, all these people have power, and those who are on the extreme fringe and the crazies will be like, hey, this person with a government job is screwing us over because they have their own, like, not only woman agenda but powered woman agenda. So that's going to be that part of that conversation. So luckily Margot was able to pass the test, but she had to kind of let all the like overflow out, and ended like cracking the cement seat that she was in, like the electricity like pierced through it, because she was like she was kind of in overdrive mode because of everything. She was able to fight it off enough to pass the test. So Daniel super wasn't happy about that. That kind of blew up in his face. He was upset because it's like, damn, I was kind of because Helen was like, yo, the reason why he's going above and beyond like this is because he's trying to take you down, because he knows you're the one person here who could give him a run for his money when it comes to Senate. So he's afraid of you. And the moment she wasn't found out to have any powers, because he was kind of suspecting she most likely had powers, that's why she was such at the forefront of this. But obviously she didn't have powers when he thought she initially had powers, but she does now. But now he doesn't know that, so it's kind of interesting how that flipped. Because it's like, oh, when I didn't have powers, you thought I did. Now that I do have powers, you think I don't. So that's going to be an interesting situation to kind of play out later on. And Margot, try to get the family together to try and have, just a dinner together. Try to, get them recentered. But it's awkward, it's weird, your kids kind of see through it. It's like, oh, your parent's going to get a divorce. I love the youngest is like, my friend, their parent got a divorce, and now it's like they get 2 Christmases. So it's like, no, we're not getting divorced. Everything's good, everything's okay. And then like Maddie kind of makes it clear where he stands, because it's like, she announces like, hey, I'm going to run for Senate. And Rob was kind of blindsided by it. But I mean, she's talking to you at least about it. Like, she's like, I'm thinking about running for Senate. I'm going to, but she's at least having that conversation rather than already having her name in the runnings. So he's feeling a little weird about it, because it's the thing of like, oh, this is a lot more than I signed up for. We are already having death threats and stuff towards the family. Now I'm doubling down now she's doubling down even more. It puts you and the family in an even more complicated situation. But he's trying to put up Facebook being like, hey, yeah, everything's okay. We see how much space. I mean, it's a big dining room table. Like, he could sit beside their daughter, but the fact is, I guess it's just the paternal thing of like, right, the parents sit on opposite sides, but at the very least, like, maybe, but I guess that just speaks about where the relationship is right now. But it's like, when you look at the camera angle from like where Rob is sitting, it seems like the distance between John Leguizamo and Toni Collette seems so massive, So that's why I'm like, oh, it feels like you could easily sit beside your daughter. If not, like, right beside your wife, at least on the other side of your daughter, so you're a little closer. But once again, it's just maybe the head of the family things of, like, both sit on opposite sides of the table. I don't know. Either way. But Maddie was in his like Ubernox bag of like, no, I won't support you. And at least she tried to be open-minded. I'm like, okay, well, tell me why that is. And he's like, Dad, like, you can't, like, Dad, you're emasculating him. The fact of the matter is he's cooking all the time. Like, oh, basically he went to some very like caveman shit of, everyone should know their roles. Like, hey, men should stay in their roles as men, and women should too. Which is like, once again, some like arcane like way of thinking, because like, yeah, there are plenty, like, would you say that to a man who's like chef, and you're like, hey, you're a man, she needs to cook now, and it's like, would you say that to Gordon Ramsay? Because I don't know if his like how often his wife cooks. I mean, I would, if I was Gordon Ramsay's wife, I'd be like, why the fuck should I cook? You're a literal chef. Why would I ever cook? So, and in Rob's case, it's like, no, your dad cooks better than me, and he likes cooking. He's like, yeah, I do like cooking, and it's like, is it wrong that he is a guy who likes cooking? There's plenty of guys that like to cook. So, once again, it's just a very like archaic way of thinking. But it's like, yeah, like men should stay in their lane and women should stay in their lane type of thing. But he's like, oh, you're emasculating dad and stuff. And he tried to bring his point up, but the moment Josh heard her, like, wait, you're listening to that loser Ubanox? That makes you a loser. And he's like, see, you of course you're not going to listen to my point. It's like before Josh jumped in, she was trying to listen to your point because that's the point of the conversation. We can be on opposite sides of things. All we have to do is listen to each other. That middle ground is such a hard thing for not just anyone on the left or just anyone on the right. It's on both sides. Everyone has that hard time being in the middle, and I get it. When you feel like, oh, the way this person talks and thinks is so asinine. It's like if you can meet them in the middle, maybe you can draw them back. And I'm not saying like, oh, someone from the left has to draw someone like, oh, like you've been drinking the Kool-Aid of the right, or someone that's on the right being like, oh, you're drinking the Kool-Aid of the left. Maybe, just maybe, you can talk to the people that are on the fringe ends on both sides who are crazy. There are crazies on both sides, on the extreme sides of things. We're not talking about like the more everyday, and we're talking about the extreme nut jobs. So it's like if you can like bring, like they are so far out, they're not willing to listen. But if you can find someone on either side that kind of hear your points, yes, you can disagree, but you can have a civil conversation, which I get as human beings, it's not so easy. Once we've dug our feet in, we as human beings, we are stubborn as shit, you know. Left, right, doesn't matter. We're all stubborn. It's just it's an innate part of us, and you know. But at the very least, if there's people on the moderate side of things, you probably can find some meaning, some middle ground. The extremists on either side, you probably can't find, like, you probably won't be able to draw them back. Is kind of the point. So I'm sure the way Margot was trying to go about it, that's kind of like a, hey, I'm trying to bring my son back before he goes too far. He's already tiptoeing. It's kind of already, not even tiptoeing, he's already halfway, maybe even 75% on the more fringe side of things, where there's, oh, Ubernox saying so. It's like you're trying to draw him back before he's too far gone. But, you know, and we saw firsthand what too far gone looked like. So, I mean, it is interesting. I feel like this situation is probably going to bring Rob and Maddie closer together, even though Rob is trying to be the middle ground. You could make the argument like and if you look at it more politically, Maddie is leaning probably more right in some regards, and obviously Margot is leaning more left. Obviously, there's like I said, the political dynamic of it all, and the kids are leaning that same way, where it's like Joss is more on her mom's side now, even though she wasn't before. Now, I think Rob might lean more Maddie's side, maybe, because we have no idea what that conversation was like. Once again, Rob is, very like, leftist in this regard, but because of everything he's feeling right now, he's primed to be in a situation where, I mean, he's older too, so, but, that doesn't mean anything. You younger people, you feel like are more susceptible, but I don't know if the flip side could be true, where it's like, statistically speaking, maybe older people are more likely to, usually when you're older, that's when you double down in kind of who you are. You're kind of steadfast. Like if you're younger, and this isn't just apply to politics, it applies to like your way of thinking in general, and just every aspect of your life, aspects of who you are, they kind of solidify and you kind of stay who you are, stay a certain way once you're older, because it's harder to change. When you're younger, you're a little bit more malleable, which makes you kind of getting sucked up into a cult-like thing a little easier in a younger age. But once again, anyone at any age could get sucked up into a cult, if you're in a position where someone can take advantage of everything you're going through. So, but like I said, Joss and Margot are definitely closer, like smoking weed, and it's like, no, this is going to be the last time. And so Margot wants to keep quiet about her circumstances, and she doesn't want to tell Rob, because it's like, for one, he's a terrible liar, but also I don't want to put him in a position of having to lie. But it's like, right, if they find out I'm someone running for Senate with EOD, like, they'll have my job, so I've got to keep this quiet until then, which Joss also gets. It's like, right, you got to kind of plan these things out. You can't just like be out in the forefront, because that's how you get attacked, and you kind of have to fight things from the inside by playing it kind of safe and low key, and then you can kind of announce once you got the job. I'm sure there's still people who'd gun for her job regardless, because she'd even talked about it with Helen, where it's like, right, they can't do anything about me because I'm the mayor, I'm already elected, it was an elected job, so you can't really just like, me having EOD doesn't change the fact that I'm still doing my job. As long as I'm not doing anything illegal, it's fine. So it's kind of that mentality, but, people will get up in arms, especially the crazies, so. And that's what I mean, and when I say crazies, I do mean the crazies who are literally everyone on the extreme streams, those who are on the extreme sides of either side of the pendulum, Either way, when Margot ends up making her announcement that she's running for Senate, we see the same guy we saw earlier in the episode. He's the one that definitely sent in the puka. We saw him pick it up when he was on the beach, and he saw Margot's house. And he saw Margot, and here in Ubernox's words, he made a point. And then at the very end of it all, because we got the warning at the beginning of the episode, I was like, how's that going to play out? Like, in what context is that? The unaliving going to happen. And we see in this moment that guy unalives himself to make a point of we won't stand for your BS. I am a man. We're taking a stand. This is a battle. I'm willing to make this sacrifice. Because we had an incident earlier in an episode where a guy was very at a bar. He was acting out. He was threatening when the bartender wanted to cut him off, he was like, no. And so it's like, right, because I think if it was a male bartender, you still probably would have been like, no, you're not going to cut me off. But even more so because it's a woman, and especially when she pulls out her powers, it's like, you're going to get out of here, I'm going to zap you. And he's like, oh, you want to play that? Like, I got a weapon too, ended up pulling out a taser. And it's like showing how bad things are getting out there. There's good that's come from this, but you see a nasty side of humanity when it comes to people not accepting change, not willing to even think about accepting it. So it's definitely going to be interesting to ultimately see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.